They said I was too old for the case. Too slow. Too irrelevant. Funny thing is, by the time they were ordering their second coffee, I had already cracked it. That's the thing about getting older. People start looking right through you, like you're just part of the wallpaper. But I've always liked mornings, especially the quiet ones. There's something about the way the sun creeps through the blinds, painting stripes across my kitchen table, that makes everything feel possible. I sat there, sipping my coffee, listening to the city wake up outside. The world was moving fast, but I didn't need to rush. I'm Miles Grayson, and I've learned that the best way to catch a fox is to let it think you're not even in the hunt. I used to be the guy everyone called when things got messy. 30 years on the force, and I'd seen it all: robberies, kidnappings, the kind of cases that made the news, and the ones that never did. I was the old dog, even before I retired. The one who could spot a lie in a smile or a secret in a handshake. But 2 years ago, I hung up my badge. Department politics, they said. Time for the new blood, they said. I didn't argue. Sometimes, you have to step aside and let the kids think they're running the show. But every now and then, I wonder if they remember who taught them how to chase shadows in the first place. This morning felt different, though. Maybe it was the way the phone sat silent on the counter, or the way my old badge glinted in the drawer when I opened it to grab a spoon. Maybe it was just the itch in my bones that told me something was about to happen. I took another sip of coffee, slow and steady, and let my mind wander back to the old days. The thrill of the chase, the satisfaction of putting the last piece in the puzzle. I missed it, more than I'd ever admit out loud. Just then, there was a knock at the door, sharp, impatient, the kind that doesn't wait for an answer. I set my mug down, heart beating a little faster. Who could it be this early? Most people knew better than to bother me before breakfast. But as I walked to the door, I couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement. Maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't done with Miles Grayson yet. And if someone was about to drag me back into the game, I was ready. The only question was, what kind of trouble was waiting on the other side of that door? I paused with my hand on the doorknob, the echo of that sharp knock still hanging in the air. My mind raced through possibilities. Old friend, new problem, or maybe just a neighbor needing sugar. But deep down, I knew this was no ordinary visit. After all, people don't come looking for Miles Grayson at sunrise unless they're desperate or in trouble. I took a breath, straightened my robe, and opened the door. Standing there was Detective Harris, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His tie was crooked, and his eyes darted past me into the house, as if he expected trouble to leap out from behind my armchair. Harris and I go way back. He was a rookie when I was already a legend, and I'd shown him the ropes more times than I could count. Now, he was the department's golden boy, but this morning, he looked more like a lost kid than a hero. "Miles," he said, voice low and urgent, "I need your help." He stepped inside before I could answer, glancing over his shoulder like someone might be following him. I closed the door, curiosity burning in my chest. Harris never came to me unless things were bad, really bad. He dropped into my kitchen chair, rubbing his temples. "It's the museum," he said. "Biggest art piece in the city, gone. Stolen right out from under our noses last night." I could see the frustration in his face, the kind that comes from knowing you're in over your head. The department was scrambling, he explained, and the higher-ups were already pointing fingers. They think I'm too close to this, that I'm not seeing straight. But I know you, Miles. You see things nobody else does. I couldn't help but smile. Just a little. "Too old for the case, huh? Watch me." The words slipped out before I could stop them, and Harris managed a tired grin. For a moment, it felt like old times, just two detectives against the world, ready to chase down the truth. But as I listened to Harris lay out the details, the missing painting, the broken security system, the nervous staff, I felt that old spark flicker to life inside me. Maybe I was retired, maybe the world had moved on, but I still knew how to read a room, how to find the thread everyone else missed. And as Harris finished his story, I realized something important. This wasn't just about a stolen painting. It was about proving that experience still mattered, that the old dog still had a few tricks left. I poured Harris a cup of coffee, my mind already racing ahead. If the department thought I was out of the game, they were in for a surprise. But what would I find when I stepped back into the world I'd left behind? And was I really ready to face the ghosts of my past? Or would this case be the one that finally proved them right? I watched Harris cradle his coffee, his hands shaking just enough to give away how rattled he really was. The kitchen felt smaller with him in it, the air thick with old memories and new worries. I could see the weight of the case pressing down on him, and for a second, I remembered what it felt like to carry that kind of burden every day. But I also remembered the thrill, the way a good mystery could wake you up better than any cup of coffee. "All right," I said, my voice steady. "Tell me everything you know. Leave nothing out." Harris nodded, grateful, and started from the top. The painting had vanished sometime after midnight. Security footage was useless. Cameras pointed the wrong way, a system malfunction that just happened to occur during the heist. The night staff claimed they saw nothing, but Harris didn't buy it. Neither did I. As he spoke, I felt the old gears turning in my head. 30 years on the force had taught me that every case starts with a story, but the truth is always hiding between the lines. I asked questions about the guards, the cleaning crew, the museum's layout. Harris answered, but I could tell he was still thinking like a cop, looking for the obvious. I was looking for what didn't fit. When he finished, I stood up and grabbed my coat. "Let's go," I said. "If we're going to solve this before breakfast, we'd better get moving." Harris blinked, surprised, but he followed me out the door. The morning air was crisp, and as we walked to his car, I felt a strange mix of nerves and excitement. It had been a long time since I'd chased a lead, but the city still felt like home. On the drive to the museum, Harris kept glancing at me, like he was waiting for me to say I'd changed my mind. But I just watched the city roll by, thinking about all the things that could go wrong, and all the things that could go right. I knew the department would be buzzing, young detectives whispering about the old dog coming out of retirement. Let them talk. I wasn't here to prove anything to them. I was here because the puzzle called to me, and I couldn't resist. As we pulled up to the museum, I took a deep breath. The building loomed ahead, full of secrets and shadows. I wondered what I'd find inside, and if the answers would be as simple as everyone hoped. One thing was certain. The game was on, and I was ready to play. But would my old instincts be enough, or was I about to find out just how much the world had changed without me? The museum doors slid open with a soft hiss, and the familiar scent of polished marble and old paper hit me like a memory. Harris led the way, but I could feel eyes on us, young officers in crisp uniforms, whispering behind their hands. I caught a few sideways glances, the kind that said, "What's he doing here?" I just smiled to myself. Let them wonder. Sometimes being underestimated is the best advantage you can have. We walked past the main exhibit hall, where the empty frame still hung on the wall like a wound. The stolen painting's absence was louder than any alarm. I paused, letting my eyes wander, not just looking but seeing. 30 years on the job had taught me that the truth is always hiding in plain sight, if you know where to look. A young officer, barely out of the academy, tried to block my path. "Sorry, sir, this is an active crime scene. Only authorized personnel." Before he could finish, Harris flashed his badge and nodded at me. "He's with me." The kid stepped aside, but not before giving me a look that said he didn't expect much from an old-timer. I gave him a wink. "Don't worry, kid. I'll try not to touch anything." Inside, I started with the basics. I scanned the security cameras. One was pointed at the floor, another at a blank wall. Too convenient. I made a mental note. Then I noticed a janitor across the room, pushing his cart a little too quickly, eyes darting away whenever I looked his way. Something about his nervous energy didn't fit. I filed that away, too. As I moved closer to the window, I spotted a faint smudge on the glass, almost invisible, but not to me. It looked like someone had pressed their hand there, maybe in a hurry. I knelt down, tracing the outline with my finger. The other officers had missed it, too busy looking for broken locks or forced doors. Sometimes, the smallest details tell the biggest stories. I turned to Harris, keeping my voice low. "Who was on duty last night?" He rattled off a list of names, but I was already thinking about the janitor, the cameras, the smudge. Pieces of a puzzle, waiting to be put together. I could feel the case starting to open up, but I knew better than to jump to conclusions. As we moved deeper into the museum, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching us, or maybe just waiting for us to leave. The clues were there, hiding in the shadows. The only question was, would I be quick enough to find them before someone else did? The deeper we went into the museum, the more I felt the tension in the air. Every step echoed off the marble floors, bouncing back secrets I was determined to uncover. I kept thinking about that nervous janitor, the misplaced cameras, and the smudge on the window. None of it added up if this was just a simple smash and grab. No, this was something else, something planned. I told Harris I wanted to take a walk around the building alone. He hesitated, but I reminded him, sometimes you hear more when you're not in uniform. He nodded, understanding, and let me slip out a side door. The city was waking up, but the alley behind the museum was still quiet. I spotted the janitor taking a smoke break, his hands shaking as he lit his cigarette. I leaned against the wall, casual as ever. "Rough night?" I asked. He jumped, dropping his lighter. "Just tired," he mumbled, eyes darting away. I watched him for a moment, letting the silence stretch. People always fill silence with the truth if you give them enough time. But he didn't crack, not yet. I let him go, but I made a mental note to check his background. Something about the way he avoided my gaze told me he knew more than he was letting on. I wandered down to the coffee shop on the corner, a place I used to visit when I was still on the force. The barista recognized me and slid a cup across the counter. "Back on a case, Mr. Grayson?" she teased. I just smiled. Old habits die hard. I asked a few questions, nothing too direct. Had anyone seen anything strange last night? Any new faces hanging around? The barista mentioned a delivery van parked outside the museum after hours, but no one remembered seeing it leave. That was odd. I thanked her and made my way to the gallery district, stopping to chat with a few old contacts. Each conversation gave me a little more, a rumor here, a nervous glance there. The pieces were starting to fit together, but the picture was still fuzzy. Back at the museum, the media was already sniffing around, cameras flashing as officers tried to keep them at bay. The pressure was on, and I could feel the department's nerves fraying. Millions of dollars were at stake, and everyone wanted answers. But I kept my suspicions to myself. If this was an inside job, I needed to be sure before I made a move. As I stood in the shadow of the museum, watching the chaos unfold, I wondered, how deep did this go? And if I kept pulling at these threads, what else might unravel before the morning was over? I lingered in the shadow of the museum, the city's morning noise growing louder as the sun climbed higher. The clues I'd gathered swirled in my mind. The nervous janitor, the van that never left, the smudge on the window. I could feel the puzzle pieces shifting, but the picture still wouldn't come clear. For a moment, I wondered if maybe the world really had moved on without me. Maybe the new detectives were right. Maybe I was just an old man chasing ghosts. I walked home, letting the city's rhythms settle my nerves. My apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you notice every creak and sigh. I set my coat on the chair and glanced at the wall, where old case photos hung in neat rows. Each one told a story. A missing child found, a thief caught, a secret uncovered. I traced my finger along the edge of a faded picture, remembering the rush of solving the unsolvable. Back then, I was the one everyone turned to when things got tough. Now, I was just a name people whispered about in the halls. I sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where Harris had come to me just hours before. My coffee had gone cold, but I didn't care. I stared at the steam curling from the mug, lost in thought. Was I really past my prime? Or had everyone just forgotten who taught them how to look past the obvious, to see what others missed? I remembered the first time I cracked a big case, how the chief had clapped me on the back, how the city had felt wide open and full of promise. I missed that feeling more than I wanted to admit. But then I thought about Harris, about the look in his eyes when he asked for my help. He still believed in me, even if no one else did. And that meant something. Maybe I wasn't as fast as I used to be, but I still knew how to listen, how to watch, how to wait for the truth to show itself. I took a deep breath and stood up, determination settling in my bones. I wasn't done, not yet. I grabbed my coat and headed back out, the city buzzing with rumors and questions. The case was still wide open, and I could feel the answer just out of reach. But what was I missing? And if I dug deeper, would I find the truth, or just more shadows from my past? The only way to know was to keep going, no matter how much the world wanted to leave me behind. I stepped back into the city's morning rush, my mind sharper now, the old doubts replaced by a stubborn resolve. The clues I'd gathered kept circling in my head, the janitor's nervous glances, the van that never left, the smudge on the window. I replayed every detail, every conversation, searching for the thread that would tie it all together. I knew the answer was there, just waiting for me to see it. I decided to start with the janitor. Something about him had bothered me from the start, and I trusted my gut. I called in a favor from an old friend at the station, asking her to run his name through the system. While I waited, I walked back to the museum, letting my eyes wander over the building's edges and corners. That's when I noticed it, a small, almost hidden door near the loading dock, just big enough for someone to slip through unnoticed. I wondered if anyone else had even seen it. My phone buzzed. It was my friend from the station. "You were right to ask, Miles. The janitor's real name is Tommy Rizzo. He's the nephew of Marco Rizzo, the art smuggler you put away 10 years ago." I felt a jolt of excitement. Suddenly, everything started to make sense. The janitor wasn't just nervous. He was connected. And if he was involved, this wasn't just a random theft. It was personal. I hurried back inside, retracing my steps to the empty frame. I looked closer at the wall, running my fingers along the edges. There, a faint scratch, almost invisible. I pressed gently, and a small panel popped open, revealing a narrow space behind the wall. My heart pounded. The painting wasn't gone. It was hidden, waiting for someone to come back for it. I stepped back, piecing it all together. The cameras had been turned away on purpose. The security system malfunction was no accident. The janitor had used his access to stage the whole thing, planning to smuggle the painting out later when the heat died down. It was a classic inside job, simple and clever. No fancy tech, just old-fashioned misdirection. But I knew I couldn't act alone. I called Harris, my voice low and urgent. "Get back to the museum. Now. I think our thief is coming back for the prize." As I hung up, I glanced at the hidden panel, wondering, would I catch them in time? Or would the old dog be outfoxed at the last second? The answer was waiting, just around the corner. I didn't have to wait long. The museum was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every sound feel louder. I slipped into the shadows near the hidden panel, my heart thumping in my chest. I kept my phone ready, thumb hovering over the record button. If Tommy Rizzo was coming back for the painting, I wanted every word, every move on tape. I trusted Harris, but I knew backup would take a few minutes. In this game, a few minutes could mean everything. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, soft, careful, like someone trying not to be noticed. I held my breath as the janitor appeared, glancing over his shoulder before kneeling at the panel. He fumbled with the latch, his hands shaking. I could see the sweat on his brow, the way his eyes darted around the room. He thought he was alone. He thought he was safe. I stepped out of the shadows, my voice calm and steady. "Looking for something, Tommy?" He froze, his face draining of color. For a second, he looked like a scared kid, not a criminal. I was just cleaning," he stammered, but I shook my head. "You're not here for the dust, son. You're here for the painting. And you're not alone, are you?" Right on cue, another figure slipped in through the side door, a man I recognized from old mugshots, older now but still dangerous. Marco Rizzo's brother, no doubt. The two of them stared at me, caught between running and fighting. I kept my phone pointed at them, the red light blinking. "You know, it's funny," I said. "I've seen this trick before. Only difference is, last time, your uncle was the one getting caught." Tommy's uncle cursed under his breath, but I could see the fight draining out of him. He knew the game was up. I kept talking, my voice low and even, coaxing them to confess. "You turned the cameras, faked the security glitch, and hid the painting right under everyone's nose. Not bad. But you forgot one thing. Old dogs remember old tricks. As the sirens wailed in the distance, I watched the two men slump in defeat. Harris burst through the doors, gun drawn, eyes wide as he took in the scene. I handed him my phone, the confession recorded and ready. "All yours, detective," I said, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. But as the officers cuffed the thieves and led them away, I couldn't help but wonder, was this really the end of the story, or just another chapter in a city full of secrets? The museum was buzzing now, the quiet shattered by the arrival of squad cars and flashing lights. Young officers rushed in, their faces a mix of confusion and awe as they took in the scene. Two suspects in cuffs, the missing painting safe, and me, Miles Grayson, standing there with a calm cup of coffee in my hand. Harris was grinning from ear to ear, shaking his head as he watched the younger detectives try to piece together what had just happened. One of the rookies, the same kid who'd tried to stop me at the door earlier, stared at me like I'd just pulled a rabbit out of a hat. "How did you?" he started, but his words trailed off, lost in the chaos. I just gave him a small smile and took another sip of my coffee, letting the moment hang in the air. Sometimes, the best answer is no answer at all. Harris clapped me on the back, his eyes shining with pride and relief. "Before breakfast, huh?" he said, his voice full of admiration and a little disbelief. I couldn't help but chuckle. "Told you, old dog, still knows the best tricks." The words felt good, rolling off my tongue with the weight of years behind them. For a moment, I saw the respect in the eyes of every officer in the room, young and old alike. Maybe they'd remember this the next time they thought about writing someone off just because of a few gray hairs. The painting was carefully removed from its hiding place, the museum director nearly in tears as he thanked me over and over. Reporters crowded at the doors, hungry for a story, but I let Harris handle the spotlight. I'd never cared much for fame. Solving the puzzle was always enough for me. As the morning sun streamed through the museum windows, I felt a quiet satisfaction settle in my chest. I'd proved to myself, and to everyone else, that experience still mattered, that instincts honed over decades couldn't be replaced by gadgets or guesswork. The city would move on, another case closed, another headline written. But for me, it was about more than just catching the bad guys. It was about remembering who I was and showing the world that the old dog still had plenty of bite left. But as I finished my coffee and watched the officers lead the thieves away, I couldn't help but wonder, what would the next challenge be? And would I be ready to answer the call, no matter how many times the world tried to count me out? As the last of the squad cars pulled away and the museum slowly returned to its quiet, I lingered by the front steps, letting the morning sun warm my face. The city was wide awake now, the streets buzzing with life, but for a moment, everything felt still. I watched Harris talking to the press, his words confident and sure, and I felt a quiet pride settle in my chest. He'd learned well. Maybe the world was in good hands after all. I took a slow walk around the block, letting the adrenaline fade. My mind replayed the events of the morning, the clues, the chase, the look of surprise on the young officers' faces. I couldn't help but smile. They'd seen something today they wouldn't soon forget. Maybe next time, they'd think twice before dismissing someone just because of a few wrinkles or a slower step. Back at my apartment, I set my empty coffee mug in the sink and glanced at the old case photos on the wall. Each one was a reminder of the years I'd spent chasing shadows, piecing together puzzles no one else could solve. I felt the familiar ache in my knees, the kind that comes from a lifetime on your feet, but I also felt something else, a spark, a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in a long time. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same spot where the day had started, and let out a soft chuckle. "Funny thing about underestimating the old-timers," I said to the empty room. "By the time you realize your mistake, the case is already solved." The words hung in the air, gentle and true. I knew there would always be another case, another mystery, another morning when someone would need a little help from the old dog. As I looked out the window, watching the city move on, I felt a sense of peace. I didn't need the headlines or the applause. I just needed the work, the challenge, the chase, the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd made a difference. Maybe I was older, maybe I moved a little slower, but I still had something the world needed. And as long as there were puzzles to solve, I'd be ready. With a final smile, I stood up, grabbed my coat, and headed out the door. The day was just beginning, and who knew what surprises waited around the next corner. One thing was certain. Miles Grayson wasn't finished yet. And if anyone doubted that, well, they'd just have to learn the hard way.